Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back again to our presentation today. I'm Ananda Dewi Lestari and my friends Mem Arni Suhestiningsih. We would like to invite you to discuss about psychological approach to language teaching and learning. Here we will invite you to know together what is a psychological approach and the kinds of psychological approach. Now let's move to the definition of psychological approach. The psychological approach can be defined as the theoretical assumptions believed by certain psychologists and are interrelated regarding self-teaching and the nature of learning in a person. At first, psychology was the study of mental symptoms, but now psychology is the study of behavior. The definition of psychology according to some experts as follows. First, according to Wundt, 1874, psychology is the science of human consciousness. In this sense, one regards psychology as a science like physics and chemistry, by seeing the consciousness is a collection of the various identifiable parts. Second, according to Woodward and Marquez, states that psychology is the science of individual activities, including motor, cognitive, and emotional activities. It means that psychology is a science that studies the activity or behavior of individuals in relation to their natural surroundings. Third, according to Anthony and Richards, in 1985, the psychological approach can be interpreted as the theoretical assumption that are believed by certain interrelated psychology regarding the nature of learning and teaching in a person. Now let's move to the psychological approach to language teaching and learning. Language learning is a process of mastery of both the first and second language. Every psychology has certain beliefs about learning. The psychological view of behaviorism differs in its beliefs about learning from the psychological view of cognition or constructivism. Here are the characteristics of behavior change in learning. First, occur consciously, continuous, functional, positive, active, not temporary, aimed or directed, and covering all aspects of individual behavior. In connection with these learning principles, this learning theory can be useful in the development of language learning and can add to readers' insight into language acquisition. Here are 5 theories about psychological approach to language teaching and learning. The first is behaviorism. The second is nativism. The third is cognitivism. The fourth is humanism. And the fifth is constructivism. Now, let's move to the behaviorism. Behaviorism is a theory of behavioral development which can be measured, observed, and generated by a student's response to stimuli. The following are theories about behaviorism. First, according to Watson G.B., 1878 to 1895, his theory emphasized attention to aspects perceived directly in language behavior and relationship between stimulus and response to the world around him. According to his theory, all behavior, including response caused by stimulation. Second is, according to Thorndike A., 1898, emphasis on learning is a process of behavior change caused by the rule of external stimuli. He stated that learning has two principles. Those are the law of effect and law exercise, or learning is the formation or a relationship between stimulus and response in solving problems that can be done by trial and error. The third, according to Pavlov, in 1848 to 1936, he argues that learning is a long series of accustomed response. This theory believes there are innate differences in learning abilities. The next is according to Pavlov. He argues that learning is a long series of accustomed response. This theory believes there are innate differences in learning abilities. He started from the idea that there are some things that a dog does not need to learn. For example, dogs don't learn to salivate whenever they see food. This reflex is hardwired into the dog. In behaviorist terms, food is an unconditioned stimulus and salivation is unconditioned response, or stimulus and response connection that require no learning. Pavlov and his studies of classical conditioning have become famous since his early work between 1890 to 1930. The last is Skinner BF in 1971. He views that reward or reinforcement as the most important element in the learning process. Skinner chose the term reinforcement over reward because reward is interpreted as subjective behavior associated with pleasure, whereas reinforcement is a neutral term. The next psychological theory is nativism theory. The nativistic or the mentalistic argues that the acquisition of language is human should not be equated with the recognition process that occurs in animals, and every human being inborn already has a talent for acquiring and learning language. Chomsky, 1960, said that only humans are the only creatures of God who can communicate through verbal language. Apart from that, the language is also very complex. Therefore, it is impossible for humans to learn language from the other God's creatures. Chomsky also stated that every child is born into the world already have provisions which he calls language acquisition tools or LAD, language acquisition device. According to this group, language learning is basically just the process of filling in the rules or structures of language rules into LAD. The LED, which consists of four talents in language, including first, the ability to distinguish language sounds from other sounds. Second, ability to organize language events into multiple variations. Third, knowledge about knowing the existence of a certain language system which is possible and another that is not possible. Fourth, ability to evaluate a language development system from the possible system in the simplest way from the obtained linguistic data. The next theory is cognitivism theory. The central concept of this approach is that a person's language skills originate and are obtained as a result of the cognitive maturity of the child. They think that language is structured or controlled by human reason. In this case, Piaget is a well-known figure in the formulation of this cognitivism theory. He said that the complex structure of language is not something that is given by nature and something that is learned through the environment. This structure is born and develops as a result of the continuous interaction between the level of cognitive function of the child and the lingual environment. Then, Piaget defined the developmental stage according to age. The stage include First, assimilation. Second, accommodation. Third, disqualibration. And the fourth is equilibration. The assimilation is the process of adapting new knowledge to cognitive structures. The accommodation is the process of adapting cognitive structures to new knowledge. The disqualibration is the process of receiving new knowledge is not the same with what he already knew. The equilibration is the mental cleansing process after the assimilation process. It can be concluded that the language learning process is more determined by the way children organize language material, not from the child's age. The language learning process is obtained through an activity or activities to understand the environment, iconic view of the world through image, verbal and symbolic visualization to understand abstract ideas. The next theory is humanism and constructivism will be explained by Mem Arni Suhastiningsih.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. Together with me, Armis Westiningsih, I will invite you to discuss about psychological approach to language teaching learning. After you have discussed about behaviorism and cognitivism, now I will share with you about humanism and constructivism. Now we come to the definition of humanism. As we know, humanism is a method of belief concerned with the needs of the people and not with the religious ideas. And then we can say humanistic approach is a method of doing something that concerned with the needs of the people. Talking about humanism, there will be main proponents. A person who advocates a theory. The first is Abraham Maslow, was one of the first psychologists devoted development of a humanist approach to psychology. And the second one is Carl Rogers, one of the most significant and influential minds in humanistic psychology. Key points of humanism. If we talk about humanism, we discuss about self-actualization, teacher as the facilitator, and then fact, focuses on human freedom, dignity, and potential. Now we talk about self-actualization. Maslow in 1943 described this level as the desire to accomplish everything that one can to become the most that what can be. And then the second is teacher facilitator. That's mean teacher try to give the facilitation for the students. What about the effect? The humanism can affect any kind of part of life, can make influence. Take for instance, humanism make influence science and technology. Humanism mean in music and others. Now we come to the focuses on human freedom. Everybody know about human freedom. What about dignity? Dignity, one of the most important thing to the human spirit, and also about the potential of the students. In this case, we will also discuss how one of the theory of teaching learning, humanistic role of the teacher. Teacher acts as facilitator of learning. So in this case, teacher enables and encourages students. Enable learning through technology with new and innovative ways to teach. Of course, become the teacher, we will motivate students and focuses on students in the classroom. Then, what about the role of the student for the humanism? For the student, the condition is learning is the student center and individualized for each student. The main goal for the student to become self-actualized. Students are further motivated and able to learn according to specific needs through the use of technology. Well, after we get more understanding about humanism, how the role of the student and then how the role of the teacher when we try to apply this kind of theory in our teaching learning process, language teaching learning process, now we come to the constructivism. Constructivism, according to Breder, Rader and Jones, 2002, constructivism, we can say the idea that development of understanding requires that the learners actively engage in meaning making. We can also say that a view of learning based on the belief that knowledge is not a thing that can simply given by teacher. The next step, what about the role of the teacher in constructivism? The role of the teacher, we can prompt and facilitate discussion. And then the teacher main focus should be on guiding students by asking many questions. It is hoped it will lead them to develop their own conclusion on the subject. And then don't forget, as the teacher, we must listen the student ideas and encourage them. In constructivism, what about the condition of the student? The role of the student, hopefully, it will active and meaningful learning. And then there will be sharing among teachers and students. And we can also do mega group and cooperation in learning. Maybe all of us still have a question in our mind how to apply constructivism in our class, in the language teaching and learning. The application in the classroom, we can do inquiry and problem-based learning, problem, launch, or start student inquiry. So the student can get more curiosity. Group work and cooperation in learning. In this case, several students working together, all members in group must be cooperative and also evolving constructivist perspective on learning. From all the situation and treatment in constructivism, we can conclude that constructivism in teaching, learning occurs as learners are actively involved in process of meaning and knowledge instruction. In this case, learners are the makers of meaning and knowledge. Constructivism teaching encourage critical thinking and create motivated and independent learners. Discuss and talking about constructivism, we can also share our opinion, our discussion based on the theory of the expert. Learning occurs by an active construction of the meaning. Students make sense of the new information, and then students create their own ways of seeing the world in which they live. One of the cognitive constructivism based on the expert is become period work that can explain focus on individual and then internal construction of knowledge, emphasize on individual search for meaning as they interact with the environment. What about Vygotsky work, social constructivism? In this case, emphasize on social interaction student-teacher, student. Well, that's all I was sharing to get better understanding about psychological approach to language teaching and learning. We find ourselves agreeing with, and hopefully we can implement in our classroom because we believe learning should be tailor-made for each student. And through this process,